This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Peter Maeck. Peter is a novelist, poet, playwright, and photographer who has served as a U.S. State Department American Cultural Specialist in Tanzania and Morocco. His award-winning photographs are in U.S. and international galleries. He was named one of the Hot 100 photographers of 2021 by the Duncan Miller Gallery in Los Angeles and joins me today to talk about his debut novel, Zänker. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Peter.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you, Peter, and I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Well, actually, the way I put it, I've been a writer all my life, and it's pretty much literally true. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I started writing a family newspaper, and I got a hold of my father's Royal typewriter, manual, of course. And at the age of maybe 6 or 7, started typing it out every day, just little tidbits of what had happened in the family. And I really enjoyed being a writer. Then skip forward to the age of 9. I'm in 4th grade, and our teacher proposed that we spend a week all writing creative writing, a short story. And we all looked at her and said, great, that sounds like fun, but this blank page in front of us is very blank. What do we do? And we all froze. And she said, well, don't worry, go home, take a magazine, cut out a picture, and write a story about that picture. And I did. And I went home and I had a copy of Life magazine. I cut out a picture of a horse, a police horse that had fallen into the Hudson River from the pier there and was being winched out by a crane. And I thought that was fascinating. So all of this feeling intimidated and daunted by a blank page just evaporated. And I had a story in front of me, and all I had to do was supply the words. And it was just, it was almost like automatic writing. And interestingly enough, I took the point of view of the horse and wrote from the consciousness of the horse being in the water, trying to stay afloat and being winched out. And I took it to class the next day and read it in front of the class, standing in front of the class, and everyone seemed to like it. And the teacher said something that I'll never forget, but I did not understand at the time. She said, you know what? Peter has a style, a writing style. I had no idea what a writing style was, but I figured if I have it, then I should use it. And when I grow up, I should be a writer. And that's how it turned out.
So rumor has it that horse wound up starring in The Godfather. Did you know that?
Yeah. And I didn't get screen credit for that.
That would be an interesting horse story to write. Kind of what happened right before Luca Brasi shows up and takes the head off the horse.
Yeah.
Do you still have that typewriter of your father's?
Actually, I don't. I still have the one that I was given for my first year of college, which was a Smith Corona Electric. Alas, I wish I had the old manual. I could probably put it on eBay and reap some reward from that. But no, I don't have it.
Do you still have the story about the horse? Did anybody in your family keep that story? I imagine it probably wound up on a refrigerator at some point in time.
I think it did. I don't have the hard copy of it. I think I recorded an audio version of it some years later, but I wish I had that original manuscript. Unfortunately, I don't even have the picture from Life magazine. So that stuff has kind of gone up in smoke, I guess.
It sounds like you were ahead of your time in the audiobook genre.
Yeah, I like to talk in front of a mic, or in this case, in front of my computer camera. When I went to college, I was very eager to become a disc jockey, which I did. And I had my own afternoon radio show, and I spun these records. But I found that even though I'm fairly loquacious otherwise, in between the records, I found myself surprisingly without much to say, other than it's 38 degrees, it's at 10 past 2, et cetera, et cetera. I never had that feeling of spontaneity that I had with the pen or the typewriter or or a computer afterward. So I did my year of DJing and decided to really commit myself to writing.
Did you have a DJ name? Did you alter your name at all? Did you give yourself a persona back in the DJ days?
Well, no, and the others, several of the others had, I guess we hired the jingle singing company, and they all had their names sung. WDCR, this is. Blah, blah, blah. I never asked for one of those, nor was one offered to me.
What market were
If
you
I
in?
did, if I did, I would be, playing it for you right
There you go.
now.
What market were you in when you were in your DJ
Well,
day?
it was a college radio station, WDCR, Dartmouth College Radio, the voice of the Upper Valley, New Hampshire and Vermont. Forgotten how many watts that station was. It was quite a few. It was quite a strong station, and it's still on the air.
Oh, there you go. Spinning the old records, and I'm sure they were records back in those days.
They were, yeah, they were.
Now I went to do a radio thing. I was being interviewed for a change at Sirius XM, and there are they have cabinets and cabinets of actual physical media for CDs and stuff because I guess there's some rule they have to have a physical copy of whatever they're playing digitally, and they
Ah,
showed me like the closet where they keep all of the stuff. I was kind of fascinated by it.
I didn't know that. Yeah. My only problem was when I started out, I was a little nervous about everything, and I hit the needle, the arm, so that the needle skidded across the very first record I ever spun.
I was interviewing a pretty famous disc jockey from LA, and he wrote a memoir called "Don't Bump the Record, Kid," because that was the advice one of his heroes had given
Yeah,
him, and that's the
yeah,
name of his memoirs. "Don't Bump the Record, Kid."
that's
So
funny.
you're not the only one who's bumped the record, I am sure.
Good, good.
Well, Peter, what can you
Good to
tell us
know.
about your debut novel, Zänker?
Well, it is my debut novel. It's certainly, as I've said, not the first thing I've ever written, but it's actually not the first novel I have written. I wrote two novels before this one, sent it out everywhere to every agent I could find and every publisher that I could find through my research, and I got absolutely no response. Well, that is not unusual for a writer writing in a new form. And so I wrote this third novel, and I thought, okay, what am I going to do to get this one published? And so one thing I thought, well, I'll pick a genre that has a built-in appeal to certain people. And since I like to solve puzzles, I like to create puzzles. I thought, well, I'll choose the murder mystery as my genre. Okay, having done that, I spent 6 or 7 or 8 months researching that genre and the format. When is the first corpse? When is the second corpse? When is the first suspect's presumed guilt erased and a new pursuit must be undertaken for another suspect? So I charted that out generically, and then it was time for me to put my story into that form. And having used the horse in fourth grade, I did something else. I took the characters from my first two novels, and I thought, what a shame to have them go to waste. So I took all of these characters and I made them all suspects, and in a few cases, potential victims of a murder mystery, which became my book. So all of my characters stuck around, and there they are now in print. Finally,
Well, that's the it's not uncommon, for your first two, long form manuscripts to get rejected, or just not pick up any steam. What I love is that
yeah,
you didn't let those characters go to waste, and you kind of resurrected them and brought them into this new work. And of course, you already knew who they were. You kind of knew what their stories were, their backstories. You probably had a feeling for them.
that's right.
So, maybe you needed to write those first two and sort of not
Yeah.
have success with them so that you could write this third one that obviously got picked up.
And as you say, I knew these characters, and that's so important. And the learning curve one has in writing anything, especially something large like a novel, is becoming familiar enough with your characters that they will begin to speak on their own, in their own, with their own inflections, their own diction, their own cadences. And so I already had that. And the best way for a character to distinguish him or herself in a play or a movie or a book is how he or she speaks. And actually, before I wrote these novels, I was a playwright for many years, actually. I wrote my first play in college, and all of a sudden I realized this is what I was born to do, write dialogue. So for 20 or 30 years, I wrote dialogue, and I was a member of the theater scene in New York City. I was one of the playwrights in the Circle Repertory Company Playwrights Labs. And I honed my ability to create dialogue, but have it sound as true to life as possible. It's obviously all artifice, it's all made up. And if you were to take a recording of someone speaking to you in so-called real life and then put that in a play, it would be quite dull. But the dialogue in a play needs to be, it has to seem as if these are real people talking to other real people, yet using the literary techniques to enliven and enhance and fashion and to shape them into something which galvanizes into a work of dramatic literature. So yeah, this familiarity with characters is the wonderful thing. And people talk about writing, and they're right. It's a solitary pursuit. You're there. On the one hand, you could say you're alone with your computer, but on the other hand, you have all of these characters. And when I get up in the morning, I say, well, I'll have my breakfast, then I'll join my characters and spend the day with them, and it's quite convivial. Even the dastardly ones, even the bad guys. In fact, sometimes they're more fun to be with than the others.
No, sure. I always said, thinking about that classic "It's a Wonderful Life," holiday movie,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
Pottersville seemed like a much more fun place than
yeah.
Bedford Falls. It's like,
That's right.
like,
That's right.
maybe you want to live in Bedford Falls, Monday through Friday, but Friday night through Sunday
Yeah,
morning, maybe if you want to hit Pottersville for a couple.
that's right. Yeah.
Oh boy. How did you find sort of going from writing for the stage, which is clearly a very visual medium, um, to writing, long form fiction, in
Mhm.
novel form? What did you learn about yourself along the way?
Well, it goes back to why did I turn from when I entered college, I thought I aspired to be a prose writer, a short story writer, and a novelist. And I was reading a lot of, I remember John Updike at the time. And John Updike was such a masterful writer that it seemed to me I would never achieve that mastery myself. It just seemed that 300 pages with 300 words on a page was going to be beyond me. So, quite by accident, I wrote a play. It was actually in a French course. It was written in French and produced during my term abroad. It was a 20-minute play. And suddenly, the act of writing dialogue and then the act or the experience of hearing and seeing it performed on stage was a revelation. And it was a great relief because I didn't have to write so many words. I could write in a different tone altogether. I was not an omniscient or semi-omniscient narrator. I would, in effect, farm myself out to 5 or 6 different characters, each of whom would be speaking part of what I was thinking and feeling, as opposed to my lording over a work of fiction in a prose style. And I proceeded to write plays, as I say, for many years. Moved to New York City, and actually, I was an actor. My first job when I got out of college was on the stage in regional theater in Vermont. And the story there is that in my senior year at Dartmouth, Dartmouth was an all-male institution for forever until when I was there, there was an experimental program where a few, 20, 30 women spent the year on our campus. One of those women was Meryl Streep from Vassar. So she and I were both in a playwriting class together and got to know each other and became very good friends. And at the end of that year, we were looking at the local newspaper and saw an advertisement, a solicitation to audition for a startup theater company, regional theater company. And she was an actress in college, and I'd done some acting in college myself. So we drove over from Hanover, New Hampshire to Woodstock, Vermont in her little Nash Rambler. We both got the job. And the very first play of the season, we played opposite each other in a romantic comedy called The Voice of the Turtle. So I can honestly say that her first paying job in the theater was the same job as my own first paying job in the theater. And we ended up making $47.50 a week. And believe she has exceeded that. And I'm sort of hovering around the same figure.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, she certainly has, had quite the career, and
Yep.
it's always a pleasure to see up on the screen, in whatever she does.
Yeah. Oh,
But this is about you. This is not about the aforementioned Meryl Streep.
yeah.
So anything else you can share about Zonker before we move on and change topics?
Well, it took me not writing every day, 7 days a week, but it took the better part of 4 years to put it all together. It's not a piece of cake to put together a murder mystery story. And I would write a draft and show it to my wife, and I would show it to my sisters and a few other confidants, and take their notes and then write a second draft and a third draft. And the months went by and the years went by. And at the end of 4 years, I had what I considered to be a final draft that I could once again send out and about. Well, I sent it out and about, and again, nothing. And then I got something. Then I got an offer for publication from, I'm eternally grateful. And thus it is in print. But it's a long slog for a writer. And it's a solitary profession, but not necessarily a lonely one. But one of the things about theater is that you write your play all by yourself, but then you take it to a theater group and you have auditions and you have writing laboratory revisions and that kind of a thing. So that's very communal. Novel writing, not so much. You kind of have to just rely on those characters you yourself have created. But it's what I'm doing almost exclusively now, as opposed to writing plays, which I haven't actually done for quite some time, because as a playwright once said, you can make a killing in the theater, but you can't make a living. And that's true.
I imagine
That is really true.
also, with a play and you're seeing it performed, there's somewhat of I don't want to say immediate gratification, but you see the audience or you can hear the audience's reaction to something. You as the writer can see your work come to life with a novel. It is a waiting game. It's a waiting game. You get feedback from agents, you get feedback from editors, beta readers, friends and family, but it's a long time before you get a sense of what the market's reaction to it is.
Right.
That's got to be another key difference, I'd imagine.
Yes, it is. And then when it is published and put up there on Amazon, you're waiting for the reader reviews, you're waiting for the Bookstagrammer reviews and the other book reviewers' comments. And so far, so good on this particular book. We're very pleased with the response, some of which now appears on the Amazon page for the book. But you talk about the gratification of an audience. Having been an actor in college and for a while after college, I've never lost the performing bug. And what I do now in the way of performing is I do guest speaking aboard cruise ships. And I talk about creative writing, and I talk about how to write your own life story, how to write your own memoir. And I talk about photography, since that's in the last 20 years something I have done, which really complements my writing. I write all day, and then at 5 o'clock every single day of the year, I spend 2 hours making a picture out of the many that I have shot over the years. I take them to Photoshop and Lightroom and edit them, and then send a new picture out every single day to a list of people that I've developed. So that is performance, such that at the end of a solitary working day, it's showtime, and make the picture and I send it right out, and I get some comments back on that on Instagram and in my personal email. And I go aboard these ships, and I stand in one of these theaters that's like, the Bellagio in Las Vegas. And I talk about writing, and I talk about photography, and I talk about the destinations for this summer, for example, Alaska, Yucatan Peninsula, various other places. So I have to get up out of the chair with great glee and eagerness and get on stage and live it as well as write it.
I mean, that's a cool gig. The cruise ship gig. I know some people who do stand-up comedy and they get booked on these, cruise ships for weeks at a time. And I always thought that was kind of an interesting way. My grandfather, after he retired, he was a field surgeon in World War II. And after he retired from his practice in Larchmont, New York, he wound up being a cruise ship doctor. So he would be uh,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Doc from Love Boat. He would do the cruise ships, and he and my grandmother would travel, and it was kind of neat. I always thought that was neat.
Yeah, well, you get the cruise, that's free. All the food is free. Everything's free. As a speaker, you're not paid. The singers, the dancers, and the musicians, I don't know how much they make. They make something, but for some reason, we speakers take the cruise and go to places I never would have gone before, and thoroughly enjoy it. Occasionally, the seas are a bit rough, and I have had to stand up there gripping the podium just to stay upright, but it's all worth it.
There you go. Well, one way I like to get to know my guests a little bit more is by talking about pop culture. So I am curious, Peter, when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV?
Well, I watched the Mickey Mouse Club, and I loved the Mickey Mouse Club. And like many of my male colleagues, I was in love with Annette Funicello.
Sure.
And I wrote a letter to the Disney company out in Hollywood. I live in Connecticut at the time with my family, and I felt the letter was so compelling and convincing that obviously they would take me to be a Mouseketeer. So I had my mother take it to the letterbox, and just before she dropped in, I said, "No, no, no, wait. I really don't want to leave home yet." I was 7 or 8 years old. So she never sent it, and I never became a Mouseketeer. To my regret, I don't think so. What else did I watch?
You write that on your father's typewriter?
Yeah, I suppose that's exactly where I did write it. Yeah, I probably did. What else did I watch? What, 50s, My Little Margie, Our Miss Brooks, thinking back, we're talking mid-50s here. And then the game shows, some of them were pretty frightening. Queen for a Day, these tales of woe and trauma, and the contestant who got the biggest round of applause from the audience would win a dinette set. I was pretty into that. Um, and then, yeah, a lot of game shows. In fact, I used to go, living in Connecticut, I would go into New York and book myself an audition to be a contestant on these game shows. Now I'm getting up into junior high school. And I always did well in the auditions, but I never got on to the show. And I assume that was just because I wasn't old enough.
Where in Connecticut did you grow up?
Well, not too far from Larchmont, actually. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut for 4 or 5 years. I was there, my beginning of my life. And then Weston, Connecticut, which is right next to Westport, Connecticut. So I was always a 45-minute train ride from New York City. So that kind of became my mecca for excitement, sporting events, theatrical events. I would always go in and get into the audience of the Tonight Show and then rush home and see myself when they panned the audience, when they showed it at 11 o'clock. Yeah, I was pretty starstruck by all of the glamorous things that were going on in New York City.
Well, I'm smiling because as we're recording this interview, I am sitting in my home in Stamford, Connecticut.
No kidding.
No kidding. And my twin brother Jimmy lives up in Weston, Connecticut. So how about that?
Oh, this is too much. That's too amazing.
And I'd say,
Well,
now,
I lived on Long Ridge Road.
that gets funnier because I live right off Long Ridge Road.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, just
People,
3 miles north of the Merritt Parkway.
people will think, yeah, that's very close to where I lived. I lived at Long Ridge Road, about a half a mile from the New York State border, Bedford, New York border.
Yeah, that's my running route. I run up there, a few times a week, up to past Rock Rimmon Country Club into Bedford.
You go right by our house. The Rock Rimmon Club was the next, I think, 2 driveways beyond us on the right. We had a 1776 house, still there. I know it's still there. It looks just like it always did, with a big red barn next to it. So the next time you're up there, take a iPhone picture of it. And
I will. Is it the big white one right at the corner of Long Ridge and Old Long Ridge at the top?
there is a big white one. It has a big long porch in front of it.
Okay.
We are 2 houses beyond that on the right,
All right.
opposite, and there's a pond on the left, and then Long Ridge, and then our house. So the distinguishing thing is the big barn as you're looking at the house just to the right.
Yep. Next time I go up there, I will snap a picture and
That
send.
is
That's a
amazing.
small world. I was also going to say you don't have to go into New York City anymore for entertainment. We've got, rest in peace, Jerry Springer show was taping right in downtown Stamford, as is Maury Povich and a few others. So different caliber than
And there was
ours Tonight Show. But
yeah.
what about
Yeah, I
what
went to Martha Hoyt School, which is now the Stanford Museum, was my elementary school.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's the Stanford Museum and Nature Center, and the Stanford Historical Society is right over there
Yeah.
too.
Yep, that stone building.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we talked a little bit about TV. How about music? What did you like to listen to when you were growing up and into your teenage years?
Well, there were the 2 big things in my life between the ages maybe 5 and 9. One was baseball, New York Yankees. I knew the lore, the history of the Yankees back to the beginning. And the other was rock and roll. And so who are we talking about? Buddy Holly and Elvis, of course. And then the Beatles came along, skipping ahead a few years. And I am still amongst the world's biggest Beatle fans. I just don't think there's been anything near approaching the quality of their work since. I was in Liverpool about a month ago and took the Beatles tour. And so I stood at Strawberry Fields Gate and I saw their homes and absorbed as much as I could, feeling it was like a pilgrimage. It was a pilgrimage. So, yeah, 50s rock and roll, and that led into 60s rock and roll. And primarily for me, that was Beatles. I loved all the stuff. The Stones are wonderful, and but the Beatles to me are really ground zero and all the way up to the sky.
Well, I guess that answers the question of the bass behind your right shoulder,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
viola bass that we were talking about
yeah.
before we started recording. There you go.
Well, I haven't learned to play it left-handed yet. I suppose that would be the best thing I could do.
Just look in the mirror, it's fine.
Look in the mirror.
What of what have you learned about yourself as through when you're writing, in what ways, if any, do you consider that to be a form of therapy for you?
It is. It definitely is. Um, Writing is a solitary pursuit, but not writing and just sitting in your chair is even more so. And so I avoid the absolute solitariness by, as I say, engaging with my characters in my stories. And it is, I can be going through a bad patch in my life, but I'll get to that computer in the morning and all of that stuff melts away for as long as I'm writing. And then, as I mentioned before, the photography, when I'm kind of drained of words at 5 p.m., the photography is so involving and engrossing, and it is such a total immersion. The other hemisphere of my brain is now being engaged, verbal all day, and then visual at 5 o'clock. So that is very refreshing. Um, as far as the therapy goes, yeah, I would completely subscribe to that idea, and it's probably why I have never, outside of 6 to 8 months, once worked for anyone else in an office. I've always been freelance, and that can be and necessarily is a perilous existence, certainly financially, and I can live with that kind of peril by simply screening out all of the anxiety and just focusing on what I'm creating. I like to make things. My last name Maeck in Flemish means make. So when I'm feeling great or when I'm feeling not great, I just want to make things.
I love that. I love that. I love that story of your last name. It's a great name for a creator. I mean, if you were, it's a name. It's a great name for a character. you know, I assume that's your real last name, and it's not.
Well, I'll let you a little spoiler for those out in the audience who have not read the book yet. I actually am a character in the book. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And by name, I name myself in the book.
Well, that's no spoilers there. We'll let the audience find that on their own. Peter, my last question for
Yeah.
you is always the deepest one, which is, I call it a letter to me or a dear younger me type question. If you could go back in time, and maybe it's to that 7-year-old who never put that Mickey Mouse letter
Yeah.
into the mail,
Yeah.
what kind of words of advice would you give your younger self if you could?
I like this question because it's very germane, very apropos. And I'll sort of ease into an answer by saying one of the things when I wasn't 7 years old, but when I was 21 years old, I was in Europe and I went to the the Monaco Grand Prix, Formula One Grand Prix. I'd never been interested in automobile racing at all. But in 1972, it was pouring rain, and the big stars of that day were racing around the streets of Monaco. And I had never been so thrilled to the marrow by anything in my whole life. We're 50 years later now, and I still have that feeling about motor racing, in particular single seat, and in particular Formula One. So I went to a day of racing school in London when I was about 24 years old, and I thought, this is great, but it's very expensive and it's dangerous, especially in those days when the racing was much more dangerous than it is now. And I put it off and put it off and put it off, the pursuit of actually getting into a car and driving at competitive speeds and learning how to take a corner. So last summer, I said, hey, put up or shut up. And I went to racing boot camp. I got my racing suit and my helmet. And for 3 days, I put pedal to the metal around the track at Pocono in Pennsylvania. And I've never been so relieved in my life to have actually done something that I wanted to do for over 50 years. All right. That doesn't fully answer your question, but the general lesson I draw from that is if you have an impulse and you're young enough to start off at the entry level, go ahead and do it. And don't worry about the risks and the possible negative outcomes. Just do it. I mean, it sounds like, it sounds like Nike, just do it. I guess that's what I'm saying is just, and it's what college is all about after all. When you go to college, you don't know exactly, most people don't, except unless you're pre-med, you don't really know where all of this will be leading. And what college does is doesn't necessarily make you an algebra, a genius in algebra. It doesn't make you an instant Pulitzer Prize winning historian, but it exposes you to 20 or 30 different fields of endeavor that you would probably not otherwise have even known existed. And one of those in your college career or in life, but in college in particular, one of those is going to catch fire. And in my case, as I say, it was the writing. I had the kindling, but the spark was writing that play in French. And then it was off to the races. And I did pursue writing. I did not put that off. And the things that I did put off, like playing this guitar up here, I really wish I had learned the guitar when I was 15 years old. I had a guitar, but did not pursue that in the way I would love to have pursued it. So do I have regrets? Yeah, those are regrets, but I'm happy that at least I am resuming my interest and my active participation in those things that I did put off while resting on the foundation of those things I've been doing for several decades.
Well, I think that phrase, just do it, worked out pretty well for Nike, and I think it'll work out well for us here too. So
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. My guest, of course, is Peter Maeck. His book is Zänker. It is out wherever books are sold. And Peter, if people want to get in touch with you, do you have a website? Do you have any social media that you're active on that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. My website, it's www. and then my name, Petermaeck. That last name can be a little tricky, Maeck, petermaeck.com. And anybody, for that matter, who would like to take me up on anything I've said today and pursue a bit of a conversation is welcome to email me at P and then my last name, Maeck, Pmaeck, at gmail.com. And as a matter of fact, if anybody wants to receive a new photograph from me every day, and I do mean every day, that's the way to do it. Send me an email.
Very good. Well, Peter, thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Hey, I've been, this has been such a pleasure. And, well, who knows? To be continued.
To be continued.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.